And here comes my mentor, Jan's mentor, and many of us mentor, Professor Michael Khor. And I have already heard parts of his lecture, and I can fully recommend it to you. The reason is very simple. Now you will learn a lot about conflict development and conflict resolution, a la China. So these are the things which I have to learn almost every day from Michael, to understand the situation in this part of the world and to understand how to resolve these issues. By the way, I think almost all of you have already heard, NTU has gone up in the world ranking of universities. Now we are number 13 on the QS ranking, and this is the gentleman who is behind all this. Not the ranking, but the sort of making this very intensive work behind these rankings on behalf of NTU. So welcome Professor Michael Khor, who is also the director of Nanyang Technological University's research office, or research and RSO, research and support office.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that was a very kind introduction. Thank you very much, Balazs. I think, maybe my talk is one that has nothing to do with my research. My research is in biomaterials, and recently I got a research program or research grant on bibliometric analysis on collaboration network of young scientists and also other outstanding scientists in around the world. But this is what I do as a hobby. So today I just share with you a bit of what I see. So basically what I like to do in my life as a whole is connect the dots. So I just share with you something and just treat this as pre-dinner entertainment. And hopefully, what I said will be additional food for conversation or food for thoughts. Okay. So what I'm going to share with you is about the period in the Chinese history at the end of the Han Dynasty, there was obviously conflict, and so I was glad that Ottilia talked about conflict, because in this case, this is a large-scale conflict, and perhaps also a very different kind of conflict, where maybe there's not so much forgiveness in it. You can imagine that the Han Dynasty has been in power for over 400 years. It was a very influential dynasty in the history of China. And if you can imagine, 400 over years is, you could say, equivalent to about 10 generations. So for 10 generations, the people in China never encounter the kind of large-scale conflict or warfare, okay, apart from maybe dealing with the barbarians in the north. We don't call them Russian at that time, but sorry, no, it's not Russian. But yeah, they are basically people who actually came from Turkey and Central Asia, and they were just trying to come into the central where it's not so cold and the lands are fertile. So you can imagine long period of peace. And also togetherness, or being united. The country is united. So there's a Chinese saying that say, a country long united must divide, and a country long divided must unite. So we come to this kind of situation where the Han Dynasty, which was once, powerful, expanding, has now gone, is now weakening, and the weakening is a slow process. You have various factions, and especially in the palace, you have the eunuchs who are like administrators in the palace who want power. The generals want power because they have tens and hundreds of thousands of men under their command. The scholars, the professors, also want power. So we see this kind of tectonic plates clashing during that period. So the three kingdoms are Wei, Wu, and Shu, and I will elaborate a little bit more as I go along. So as I said, the Han dynasty was on decline. And the decline is a slow process, but it's a sure process over easily 100 years prior to the final fall. And there was struggle for power. And this kind of situation, once there is instability, rebellion will rise up. And rebellion took place in China, in the Han dynasty, by a group of people called the Yellow Turbans. And so when rebellion rise up, naturally the emperor will say, who will rise up and defend the Han dynasty? And then one general will say, yes, I will do it for the Han dynasty, for reward, obviously. Maybe a big piece of land or a grand title like Duke, so that he can control his own fiefdom, so to say. But it turns out that this general who went out to fight the Yellow Turban found that he might as well take over the entire empire, because he could detect that the structures were very weak, and they were just like puppets there. So opportunists seize control. And once someone make a move, others will say, well, if you can do it, I can do it too. So it sounds a little bit like the university. People say, you are not the only guy with a PhD. I have a PhD too, and I'm also a professor, and I have published 100 papers, and then that kind of thing. So the old structure is collapsing, and naturally that leads to turmoil. The three main protagonists at this early stage of the fall is Cao Cao, who controls the Wei part, and they call it the Wei Kingdom, and he basically wants to maintain Han for his own agenda. But there was an opportunist on the eastern side, around the Shanghai region of today, called Sun Quan, who wants independence. They say, well, the Han is weak, we might as well, have our own place, and then we'll have our own country. So they wanted independence. Then there's a distant relative of the emperor called Liu Bei. So the family of the Han dynasty family is Liu. So those whose surname is Liu, once upon a time were, related to the emperor, or at least to the royal family in the Han. So you should still treat them well. So Liu Bei, being a distant relative, feels that he is under obligation to maintain Han. But because he is not in the capital, he decided to have a new Han, and hopefully then maintain Han at the same time. And then, since we are in this East-West workshop, I thought I'll bring across to you all some East-West reflection, because the Three Kingdom period is a time of great flux. Things are changing, and the change is inevitable. And as I thought about this, I thought about a few phrases that I came across, and one is by a philosopher, I think it's a Greek philosopher. He is known for this phrase, pantare. And re is the root word for rheology, which is the science of flow of liquids. So everything flows. So just like water or any fluid, it flows. But yet, he says, ever newer water flows on those who step into the same river. Meaning to say, they may look the same, but they are not the same. Meaning to say, the water molecule that you touch on the first instant, it's not the same water molecule that touches you the second instant. So everything changes, nothing remains still, and you cannot step twice into the same stream. So that's basically what I just said. Then there are Latin phrases that basically say the same thing. Omna mutantor, and tempora mutanto, nos et muta Mutamo in illis, which means time change and we change with them, right? Then there's a Japanese a priest, a Buddhist priest, who wrote a very nice poem, Hokoji, also said something like this: the current of the flowing river does not cease, and yet the water is not the same water as before. You see, so water changes as the stream flows on and on. So we have Wei, ruled by Cao Cao, and he has the emperor in his so-called quote-unquote protection. And then you have Sun Quan in the Wu, and then Liu Bei, who finally managed to carve out a small area on the present-day Sichuan, Chongqing region, including part of Yunnan, called the Shu Kingdom. So that's how the three kingdoms exist during that period. And there's a lot that we can learn. Now, Cao Cao is being portrayed in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms as kind of a bad guy, a really bad guy. He's portrayed as cruel and merciless. But then there are those who, historians, who also praise him as a brilliant ruler, a military, who's good with tactics, and also he treats his subordinates like his family. So even though he is ruthless, he has an eye for talent, and he cared for his people. So obviously he's not just an out-and-out bad guy. But he's able to inspire his troops as well. But he's a complex guy, and he's probably the kind of guy that a lot of psychologists would want to study today. And he even said it of himself. He said, in the past, people do not understand me. Today, the people still don't understand me. In the future, people still will not understand me. That is Cao Cao, all right? Okay, but so in fact, when he was a young man, there was a fortune teller who made this prediction of him. He said, you would be a capable minister in peaceful time and an unscrupulous hero in chaotic time. But what we will see, and later on I will relate one of the stories to you, is that Cao Cao was brilliant, but also could be cruel. It's just simply being pragmatic. He knows what he wants, and he knows what he needs to do to get it. Okay, end of story. He has many wives, like men of their day. I think he was like 12 wives, four wives and 8 concubines, that sort of thing. Don't ask me how he did it, but he could do it. But then he was survived by his eldest surviving son, Cao Pi, but he failed to reunite China. Then we come to Liu Bei. So Liu Bei is a different character. So Cao Cao, Liu Bei, and Sun Quan, they're all different characters. And so those of us who study or read the Three Kingdoms like to, and after we finish reading, we'll say, this guy in my organization, he reminds me of Cao Cao. And then these other guys remind me of Liu Bei. Liu Bei basically has a group of loyal friends. So he's good in cultivating loyalty among his friends. He has very strong principle. So he basically wants to live an upright life, and he basically practice service or servant leadership, and he stressed very much on his righteous character, meaning that he wants to do no wrong. But sometimes he can come across as very stubborn and rigid. He would go all his way to recruit. So I could see that each one of them could well be a university president today who could go out and recruit talent, because Cao Cao is very good in recruiting talent. Liu Bei is also very good in recruiting talent. And the famous story about how Liu Bei recruited his military strategist Kongming or Zhuge Liang is that he went to visit Zhuge Liang in his home in Shandong province, not once, not twice, but 3 times, without managing to see Kongming or Zhuge Liang. And of course, Zhuge Liang intentionally, stay away whenever he knows that Liu Bei and his brothers attempt to, recruit him, just to test him, test his perseverance, right? So, but he is good at recruiting people, and that is his forte, and that's what brings him some success. He has 2 sworn brothers who are excellent fighters, Guan Yu or Guan Gong and Zhang Fei. They both have their faults, but in the initial period of the campaign, they were successful. But in the end, Guan Yu became arrogant, and that led to his downfall. Zhang Fei has a terrible, terrible temper, and he drinks too much. So that's very bad combination. You drink too much, and then you're a violent guy. So violent to his men. So in the end, he was killed by his own soldiers who could not take his abuse anymore. Okay, so that tells you, got to, I think yeah, about changing your character. You have to change your character, otherwise you'll meet a terrible end. Then on the east is Sun Quan. Sun Quan is a brilliant guy, but in the early days, it was his elder brother, Sun Ce, who was in control of the Wu kingdom. But Sun Ce obviously had a lot of enemies, and one day the enemy ambushed him and then shot him with a poison arrow, and he died of that poison arrow. And then he was then he became the ruler of Eastern Wu at a very young age of around 17 years old. So, yeah. But he was fortunate. So among the 3, probably he had a better life, you could say, because he had good military advisors, both for the civilian rule as well as for military. And initially, he was able to ally himself with Liu Bei, and then there was this famous battle of the Red Cliff, Zhang, and then they won, and then they repelled Cao Cao's army from coming to the south. So in fact, I mean, we're talking about east-west, but in the Chinese context, for many, many centuries, what we talk about is actually the north-south kind of difference, because the northerners are different from the southerners. So for for us, it's more of a north-south sort of comparison. His primary strength is that he's able to make use of talented people, administrators and generals, to help him rule Eastern Wu. Then we come to this famous character in the Three Kingdoms, who is Zhuge Liang or Kongming. He helped Liu Bei establish his empire. He's very skillful. He was an astrologer, so he could read the stars and able to predict weather patterns and make use of the weather to help in his military plans. Okay, so there are a couple of interesting stories from Zhuge Liang. One of them is called borrowing arrows from your enemies. There was once that they ran out of arrows, right? So Zhuge Liang said, well, I'm going to guarantee you that I'm going to get this amount of arrow for you to the Wu ally. And then the Wu ally didn't believe him. But Zhuge Liang, having studied the weather pattern, knew that there's going to be strong wind on that particular night. And then he got boats made out of straw. And then he sent the boat over to the other side of the river where the Wei soldiers are. And then as they approached, the Wei soldiers shot a lot of arrows onto his fleet. And without, and as you can imagine, they managed to collect the arrows on the straw men and then bring back. So that was borrowing arrow from your enemies. So in a way, in the corporate world, I think a lot of times, it's being exercised that way too. You're borrowing the strength of your competitor to your advantage. Okay. There's also another interesting story about Zhuge Liang. It's called the empty city ploy. There was a time when he was under attack by a much larger army, and then his reinforcement did not come. So he could not defend the city very well because he only had like 1,000 soldiers, all right, whereas the enemy is coming with over 50,000. So that's just impossible. So what did he do? He instructed his men to open the gates of the fort, and then he would put himself on top of the fort and play his lute, okay, to show that he's relaxing. He's very relaxed. He's very calm. And the enemy, seeing that Zhuge Liang is, having the gate open and fearing that this guy, Zhuge Liang, is full of tricks. This could be one of the tricks from his big bag of tricks. They said, we better don't attack him today. You never know, with an open gate, anything can happen. So that was another very nice story about his craftiness. So main strategy of Zhuge Liang is to avoid conflict with weaker state. That means he's always saying to his lord, Liu Bei, don't fight with Wu. We are both weak relative to Wei. So we must combine so that we can contend Wei, who is Cao Cao. Okay, so always form alliance among weak states to counter the strong state. So maybe I can see that in universities too, the not so strong or influential academics would collaborate, all right? No point fighting with each other. Learn to collaborate. Win-win. Then we have Zhao Yun, who is a famous military general who served with Liu Bei, and he's famous for rescuing Liu Bei's son by going through 800 of Cao Cao's soldiers. So this was shown in the Red Cliff, and also other movies. Okay, now I want to talk about a worthy life, because I thought about the theme of this workshop. During the Three Kingdoms, you couldn't say that anyone had a very good life or even a good life. But then there are people who felt, as I look back, I said there are people who had worthy lives. So that's why I call my talk a worthy life with a question mark. So this is the story of Liu Bu and Chen Gong, his advisor. So a lot of times during the old days, the generals would have strategies, because the generals are like all muscle but very little up here. Whereas the advisors are the people who are very, very smart, but they don't have the muscle to ride on horses and carry spears to charge. So together they make a good couple, right? So Liu Bu is a general. So he's good looking. He married the most beautiful woman in the whole of Han. So he's highly successful, but he needs Chen Gong, his advisor. So he's the best. Here we have the best warrior. But then he has a weakness. He has, as I said, he has the most beautiful woman in China at that time as his wife, and he has 2 other wives. So you can imagine he's also having a kind of good life, but he was under siege, and so because he wasn't able to defend well, he was captured by Cao Cao. Chen Gong is brilliant as a military strategist, but because his boss is not so smart, so he got captured as well. So Chen Gong, who used to know Cao Cao, didn't want to have anything to do with him. So when Cao Cao asked him what might happen, since now that you're not joining me, Chen Gong said, there is death for me today, and that's the end. He's prepared to face death, and that's it. And Cao Cao asked, then it's well for you if you're an individual and you say, I want to die. But what of your mother and wife and children? So this is a way of Cao Cao playing into the psychology and trying to play mind games with Chen Gong and say, think about your mother, think about your wife, and think about your children, right? But he was resolute. He said, I'm a defeated military strategist. I'm in your hands, and I asked for nothing but death. So he got granted the wish. you know, and then, so this was the poem written of Chen Gong. So you can, well, maybe I'll read to you. So neither hope of life nor fear of death moved him. How brave he was, a hero. So he was viewed as a hero because he wasn't afraid of death. But his Lord, who is Liu Bei, heeded not his words, wherefore in vain possessed he great talent. Nevertheless, in that he stood by his master to parting with wife and mother. He merited our pity and profound respect. Who would resemble Chen Gong? That day he died at the White Gate Tower. So indeed, after he was beheaded, Cao Cao gave explicit order. Make sure his wife and his mother are well looked after. No harm should fall on them, and indeed that was the case. Then we come to Liu Bei. So Liu Bei, the great general, the mightiest warrior of Han. Now that he's captured, he said to Cao Cao, your only trouble, illustrious sir, is myself, and I am now on your side. You take the lead. I will help you, and together the world is at our feet. But Cao Cao, being the smart guy that he is, did not take up this offer. So this poem was said of Liu Bei. After that, he said, round is the hungry tiger, eater of men, for whom is no pity. Since the blood of his victim is fresh and not yet dry, Liu Bei spoke no words in favor of Liu Bei. Liu Bei was present, but he didn't want to have any good word to say of Liu Bei. In fact, he said, this is a guy with 3 fathers but no surname, which means that he has 3 adopted fathers, but he was disloyal to all of them. So Liu Bei spoke no words in favor of Liu Bei, to whom even a father's life was not sacred. So that was the reason. So this was the poem said of Liu Bei, and therefore Liu Bei was not spared. But on that day, there was another guy called Zhang Liao. He was a general with Liu Bei, but he was highly offensive to Cao Cao. He scolded Cao Cao, and so Cao Cao said, well, I'm going to get rid of this guy who has been insulting me nonstop, right? But then someone said to him, one of his assistants said, but this guy is a good general, right? So Cao Cao, being the pragmatic guy, was able to take all the insult and spare the life of Zhang Liao. So which tells us that Cao Cao, though could be ruthless, he is pragmatic. He knows that if he can make use of someone, he is willing to take insults. So to me, I think it speaks volume of Cao Cao's pragmatism. So Liu Bei whining was not spared. The railing Zhang Liao far better fed. Okay. Then since we're talking about a worthy life, there's a few other examples. Tong is one of them. So Tong is another military strategist of Liu Bei. So Liu Bei was invited by the ruler of this place called the Riverlands, which actually is the present-day Sichuan and Chongqing, because they were under attack by Cao Cao. So they needed Liu Bei to help repel the invasion. So Liu Bei was invited to help fight and then leave. But the Tong's advice is that since you're here, why don't you take the land? And besides, the guy who is in charge of the land is not a strong guy, you must take. But Liu Bei is very principled, says, no, I will not do it. All right? Then Tong said, well, in his mind, Tong has a scheme. If my lord, my master, is so upright and so righteous, I must give him a good cause to attack the guy who is in charge of the Riverland. Therefore, he intentionally rode into an ambush set by the soldiers of the Riverland, who didn't trust Liu Bei in the first place. So as a result of his death, Liu Bei got a so-called righteous cause to take over the Riverland, right? Because he helped them repel Cao Cao, and in return, they kill his military strategists. You see? So as a result, he said, I got now a righteous cause, and he took over the modern-day Sichuan and Chongqing. Huang Zhong, on the other hand, is a military general. He's an elderly general. It said that when he joined Liu Bei, he was well over 65. So for those of us, you know, I mean, there's still a lot of promise after 65. But he sacrificed himself during the invasion of Wu by Shu because they were fighting over another place called Jingzhou. So in the end, he was shot by archers. Again, it was something that he did to sacrifice himself. So he had a worthy life in that sense because he was able to help the forces of Shu to be successful against Wu. And then when he was brought back to the Shu main camp, he died of his wound because he was ambushed. Then we came to the final example, that is Xun Yu. Xun Yu is a strategist. He's a politician. And he's a valuable advisor to Cao Cao. He contributed to Cao Cao by recommending many talented men to Cao Cao, but he also advised him on many military matters. But towards the end, he opposed the idea for Cao Cao to set up a self-contained feudal state within the Han dynasty, because towards the end, one of the advisors of Cao Cao said to the emperor, why don't you give Cao Cao a title called the Duke? When you're a Duke, you can have your own land, and then you can, like autonomous, right? You can be autonomous. But this was against the principle of Xun Yu. So a popular version of his death was that after he fell out of favor with Cao Cao, and he was sick. He was very sick. He was having terrible cough, persistent cough, and was really, really sick. Then Cao Cao asked one of his assistants to bring an elaborated gift set to Xun Yu. And this guy brought it to Xun Yu and said, Cao Cao gave this to you. You are sick. So at first, Xun Yu thought, okay, maybe Cao Cao, has forgiven me. But when he, struggling with his cough, struggling out of the bed, opened the gift set, he found that it was empty. Then immediately he get the message. He said, there's nothing for me anymore in this life. And therefore, he committed suicide after he get the message. Okay, I'm going to round up by just sharing with you a few key lessons from Three Kingdoms. Some of them I have not yet elaborated before. So the key lessons learned is the best strategies and best armies cannot overturn heaven's will. So-called, what is something that is beyond man's control, so to say. Okay, fate. You could say it's fate. Yeah. So the best strategies and the best army just cannot outrun fate. Cao Cao, on the other hand, on his part rather, I should say, behaved like an emperor because he already had the real emperor as his hostage. So he basically is in control. He doesn't need to be the emperor, and so until the day that he died, he just maintained his position as a prime minister, and he never crossed the line. Another lesson is that when fighting a competent army, anytime they start fleeing quickly, there is an ambush. Do not be fooled. If you pursue them, you will result in defeat. Then, fourth point, always listen to a dying man's last wish or advice. There was a guy who the state of Jingzhou was a very important strategic location. The guy who was initially in charge of Jingzhou said to Liu Bei, please take this place as yours. And Liu Bei, being the very principled and righteous man, said, no, I will not take something that belongs to another man. And that was wrong of him because he didn't take Jingzhou, he could not have a strategic location for his subsequent fight with Cao Cao. So he should have listened. Okay? And also, another thing is never be smarter than your boss. And never let your boss know that you can read his mind, even though you can. Because there was a guy who always tried to second guess his boss, who happened to be Cao Cao. First few times he got it right. But he only need to make one mistake and then his head is off. Okay, so that is an important lesson. Another lesson is all generals have their own strengths and weaknesses. There's little to do with the age, because there's a very good general, age 60-something, and he still fight. Underestimating someone will lead to your downfall. Another lesson is when a force invades your land, attack them as fast as possible before they have the chance to rest. Okay, and then the third one has to do with logistics. Logistics is very, very important. If you have problem with logistics, you have no chance to secure any victory. So even today, in research, make sure your pipeline is a strong pipeline. Your ideas are very well lined up. Okay, you got to protect your supply line at all costs. Talents comes in all forms and may not be what you like them to be. Tong was said to be a very ugly man, but he has a brilliant mind. Huang, he is very old, but yet he is brilliant in the field. So talents can come in all forms, and never underestimate appearance or age. Thank you.
One question before we start the question. What is the end of the story? A unified dynasty or unified China again?
Yeah, obviously.
We have to.
Yes.
Because for the Western world, this is the success story.
Yes.
For the Eastern world, all these conclusions and how to, that's the major conclusion. For a Western king,
yes.
kingdom,
yes,
like France under Charlemagne.
Yep.
It's a unified kingdom again, and we have a king.
Exactly.
But for China?
For China, yes. After that, finally someone else unified the whole of China. Yeah. But none of the three.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of the three. Yeah. Yeah. So in fact, Cao Cao's descendants, he was able to pass the kingdom to another son, Cao Pi. And then Cao Pi was able to pass it to another son, Cao Shuang. And then after that, another one, or maybe Cao Shuang. After Cao Shuang, someone else took over and got rid of the Cao family. Okay, so it shows that when you keep fighting, when you keep on fighting for too long, you weaken yourself. You may weaken your enemy, but you weaken yourself, and then someone else will just take everything away from you. So conflict should be avoided, or at least you have to resolve conflict. Win-win situation. That's why collaboration is so important. We all must have the spirit of collaboration.
Questions?
With respect to management, I would like to comment on the last sentence, never be smarter than the general. I think the best way to manage something is to have a complementarity of hierarchy. Somebody has to sign the check, and heterarchy. So on the level of knowledge generation, for instance, consulting, everybody is equal. Yes. So I would never say to one of my doctoral students, I'm smarter than you because I'm a professor. No, on that level, one is equal. And I think this has to be taught and has to be learned, that we have these two ways to interact.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely agree with you. And in fact, Cao Cao demonstrated that very well, because when he gets an advice from his advisor, he would not say, this is rubbish, forget it, you're stupid. No, he will not say. He will say, this is fine, but let me add something to this. And then he was able to modify the plan and make it work. And when the plan that he tried to modify did fail, at one point it did fail, he was open enough to admit and say, I should have listened to you. And he said that to Sima Yi. I should have listened to you. You were right. You see? And then Sima Yi as a subordinate will remain very quiet and not even smile. because that's important. Even though your boss admit that he's wrong, you should not take it as a victory. You should just pretend that nothing happened. This is how to relate to your boss. Always respect him as the boss. Yeah.
Coming from comparative literature without being an expert on Chinese literature, I mean, this is a fabulous novel, I mean, absolutely. And there are many features which looks like Western epic from some of the same periods. I mean, working in the typology of characters, as you show, strategy, notions of courage. But I think there are two things, one which I will ask you about, and that, because that's a word you didn't mention, namely the value of strategy, which comes out of the old Chinese various treatises on war, on the art of war, where strategy is so hugely important, and the big advisors are strategists, with Zhuge Liang, of course, as the most potent, because he has magic powers as well. I mean, there's this kind of level to it also. But I mean, how does a notion of strategy plays in here? And the second has to do with Ballas's question, because I think there's no success story in this epic here as you have in others, because you have this notion of fate, which is in the first, as you quoted them, what is united will fall apart. Yes. So a success will be for a certain amount of time, and then you will have a new dynasty or a new war or whatever. I mean, so success is relative, and that is my real question here, namely these different conceptions of time, history, and human agency, where at least European, the sense of history that was created in Europe, whether it's Western or not, it was created in Europe and spread with colonization and so on and so forth. Namely that history is a linear thing where humans can decide the future, and the criteria for managing history is to have a future which can last and which is better. And that's one of the things we have difficulties with, according to that sense of history, that downfall, or like in Europe right now, I mean, crisis in Europe, that's a normal part of history, but it is always regarded as something extraordinary. Do you see any important conflicts or what shall I call it, differences, call them East-West or whatever, between those two different sense of history, this kind of, it goes up and down? That's the Chinese one, and the European-based one, which has spread, is it has to go up. If it doesn't go up, it's a failure. But falling apart is not a failure here, it's just, poor you, you happen to live in that phase in history where things fall apart, poor you, but that's why you can't do anything about it. So do you see any differences here?
Yes, I do. In fact, and I quite agree. History cannot be seen as something that is linear. In fact, it's highly complex, and there are many factors that determine the outcome. And you're right, the best strategy does not decide the outcome in many instances, because there are so many other factors that play out. So at the end of the day, I think a lot of times what we see that did happen is a combination, and good fortune or good luck or whatever that you like to call it is very crucial as well. So nothing works like clockwork in real life. There's always that 1% that could go wrong for you. But just like what Winston Churchill said, he says one of the secret to his success is that he always worked on a very, very good plan B. And I think that if you look at Cao Cao, especially Cao Cao, he always have a very good plan B, or he could improvise. There was once when he was fighting with with another group of people who was attacking him. The Ma Teng was attacking him. The Ma's are the people from the central, but they are kind of assimilated into Han previously. But they still they're good horsemen, but they're wild, wilder than the normal Chinese, let's say, during that time. And there was a time when the Ma's were attacking him, and he and his army marched out to face them in a plain, all right, where they can fight, right, in a flat land where they can fight. But they had to build a wall in order to defend themselves. But what happened is that they ran out of a supply that is able to fortify the wall or make it solid. But you can imagine that this is northern China. So they were facing certain defeat. But it was something that one of his advisors said, oh, tonight it's going to be very cold. Oh, I'm afraid that we're going to find that the water will turn into ice, Immediately he realized, yes, because tonight is going to be so cold that water is going to turn into ice. He immediately asked his soldiers to then put a lot of water together with the mud so that the next morning they have ice to form the wall. You see, so it was that kind of grabbing opportunity when it presents itself. And I think a lot of times that was the reason for his success. He was able to seize whatever opportunity comes to him, And it has to be that he's also quite desperate.
I probably have asked from you, but it comes to my mind again and again. I was 13 or 14-year-old in good old communist Hungary. Well, that was an exaggeration, of course. The Mao Zedong's little red book was distributed secretly by the Chinese embassy, the People's Republic Embassy, to everybody on the street and whatever, because it was, of course, forbidden literature. But I was interested, so I read this little red book of Mao Zedong in Hungarian. And there was a sentence which still is in my mind. And I cannot, let's put it this way, it's a riddle for me, but I would like to know the solution. It says, if we win only 50% over our enemies, neither our enemies nor we can be all right, we can feel fine. It's not a good solution. But if we win fully over our enemies, both our enemies and ourselves should be very happy. No, coming from the Western Hemisphere, that was a riddle for me. So if somebody has victory over me, why should I be happy? But coming to Singapore a couple of years ago, I start to understand more and more and more this sentence. Because if you are not winning over your enemies or your opposition fully, it's a kind of a so-so situation. It's 50-50. It's not really a solution. But if I'm the winner, I'm happy because I won. But if I'm the victim under the strong ruler who can tell me what to do, then I should be happy because I have a clear direction, I have a clear sort of strategy in my future and so on. Is this the kind of interpretation, or this is just a stupid Western interpretation of this nonsense? Or seemingly nonsense?
No, Balash, you are right, and I will explain to you why you are right in that kind of interpretation. So let me start by saying, we all know about the saying, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That is the 50-50 situation, right? You hit me on one eye and I hit you on the other eye. I lose one eye, you lose one eye, 50-50. That's bad, right? Okay, so we settle that. Now we come to your explanation. And why is it that when one guy lose, the other guy win and it's the 100% thing, and then both are happy? Many instances, and I'm sure Jan, you can recall, when a general is defeated and he is bound before let's say Cao Cao or Liu Bei, and then Liu Bei walks over to the defeated general and untie his ropes and say, look, we want you to be part of us and we want you to join us. And immediately the guy say yes, then his position is completely changed. So he's happy. He's now accepted by the guy who defeated him. And many times it's like that. By giving in, you win. It's a bit of a, you know, a paradox, you could say. But it could be a strategy too. You gain when you give in, or you win when you give in. You know, but when you resist, like the 50-50 thing, you know, you lose an eye, I lose one eye. It's not a good situation.
Enough. If you lose an eye and then you attack me and you want, okay, destroy one of my eyes, usually you destroy more, a little bit more, because when you fight back, you have to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more stronger, a little bit stronger. And then it's your turn. So you take 2 of my eyes, then it's my turn. I take, well, 2 of your eyes and one of your ears. So you must exceed the damage that was given for you, and it's the whole thing is escalating.
Yes.
Yes. So and there is never it doesn't come to a still stop.
Yeah.
It never ends.
Yeah.
So if you defeat wholly, I mean. Yes, terminally the other one, then yeah, the peace is coming. Or if the other party is admitting that, all right, you are the boss, you win. So I just try to accommodate to the situation. Yes.
Yeah, and I could also share that this is what I read, that in the animal kingdom even, when you have the dogs fighting, or even among wolves, it was said that when one of the wolves lose, he offered the neck to the winner, but the winner will not take it. And that kind of like evens the whole thing. You know, the loser say, yes, I admit I am the loser. And once there's acceptance that I'm the loser, the winner said, okay, that's all I want. I don't want your life. I don't want to bite your neck and tear it apart, out, but just, that's it. Is that right?
Comparing the 5 strategies, that so there is this collaboration when you come to a consensus, and this is compromise. So when you say, all right, you lose a little bit and you win and I lose, I win, there is never a good agreement that the amount of your loss is the same as the other party's amount of loss. Each party feels that, all right, I've lost more than him or her, so let's start it again, or let's just get back as much as I can. So just think of the former Yugoslavia. So that was a compromise.
Yeah.
And just within a sec, in historical terms, within a sec, just everything was over, and the 2 parties wanted to win, because both of them felt that they sacrificed more than the rest of the country.
Yeah.
No more? Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you.